Hey everyone, it's Mrs. Peckett, and in this video we're going to be going over our unit on local government. So there's going to be 3 guiding questions throughout this study guide. The first one is, in what ways is local government part of a democracy? How can citizens participate in local government? And how can people organize themselves to meet needs not met by the government? So before we get started, I just want to quickly define 3 terms that we've talked a lot about in class, but that are really important to know in order to understand how our local government works. The first one is the word democracy, and that is probably the most frequently used word we will have in all of grade 6. Democracy is a word that comes from ancient Athens, and it means the government of the people. So it's when citizens and people have a say in decisions that are made in our government. We discussed 2 different types of democracy. We talked about what a direct democracy is and a representative democracy. A direct democracy is when the citizens get to have a say in all decisions that are made in the government and all laws that are passed. So they would vote on all issues. Unfortunately, that's just not something that would be possible in our society. First of all, mainly because we just don't have time to go and vote on every decision. So instead, what we have is what's called a representative democracy, and that's where we choose people that we trust to make the decisions on our behalf. So as a citizen who is over 18 years old in our local government, when it is election time, I will elect 1 mayor. I elect 1 city councillor for my ward, as well as 1 school board trustee. So we have 3 different levels of government. We have our local or municipal government, and that's the government for our city. Then we have our provincial government, which is the government for our province, and then we also have a federal government, which is for the country. In grade 6, though, we just learn about our local government and our provincial government, while touching here or there on federal government as well as necessary. Each level of government is in charge of providing services in order to meet the needs of citizens. So our local government, their services focus on what the people in the city needs and what is necessary for our city to run. So some examples of these services are seniors facilities, public transportation, so that's bus and LRT, streets and roads, libraries, fire, police, EMS, animal control, city parks and recreation, so by recreation, things like Terwilliger Rec Center, things like that, and waste disposal. As you can see, a lot of these services cost a lot of money. So you might wonder, how does the government actually make money? Like, what do they do in order to make money to be able to spend on all these different services that are provided to citizens? So the main place where our local government gets their money from is property taxes. So anyone who owns a home or a business has to pay property taxes to the local government. The local government sees this as money that they can use to provide services. Another word for that is revenue. So that's revenue is money that the government makes. That's important to know. Hint, hint. Okay. Some other ways that the government has revenue is user fees. So when people use the LRT, Terwilliger Rec Center, city-owned pools, they're paying money in order to do that, and that money goes to the government. Sale of goods, transfer payments, so money that might come from our provincial government and that's given to our local government. Property taxes, so as I said, people who own a home or business pay these. And rental of equipment. And that's other ways that they can make money. Now, making money from the government is called revenue. The government also has to spend money. So when the government spends money, that is called an expenditure. Okay, expenditure kind of says spend in there, so that might be a way to remember that. So here's some of the things that our local government spends their money on. Some of their expenditures are roads. Again, this is roads that are in the city. So when you're driving down the street and maybe you or your parents complain about all the construction that you see, all that is happening, all those workers are being paid, and all those materials are coming from the revenue, or I guess the money that the local government has and that it is spending. Agricultural services, parks and recreation, so places like Terwilliger or outdoor parks, those all cost money. Protective services, administration, So just paying people to work for the government, and water and waste management. And some of you were with me in grade 4. We went and saw the Waste Management Center and how it was run. And you can imagine how much money is required in order for that to happen. So it's important that the government has money that they can spend on all these services. Local government is also able to pass laws, but these laws that are for a city have a special name called bylaws. They're enforced by bylaw officers to make sure that people are following them. Here it says, check out the City of Calgary website to read about some pending bylaws, so ones that are about to become bylaws, and other ones that have been passed. You can look at the City of Calgary because we are studying local governments in Alberta, but you can also look at the City of Edmonton website to learn about some of our bylaws as well. So bylaws can be, and did I talk about this further down? I don't think so, so I'll quickly touch on it here. They're rules that are made for within a city. So this might mean things like graffiti, or riding your bike on the sidewalk, or certain heights that we're allowed to build our fence, or shoveling your sidewalks. Things like that are bylaws because they don't affect the entire province, but they do affect what happens in that city. The great thing about living somewhere where we have a democratic government is that we're allowed to have a voice. Our government cares what we think, and they think that what we have to say matters, because at the end of the day, we're the people living there, and their job is to represent us. So there's a number of things we can do to have a voice and actually make a difference in decisions that are made. We can contact the mayor's office or alderman via email, phone, letter, fax, or in person. We can start petitions, so that's where you get people. I think a lot of you know what that was because I'm pretty sure you did one last year in your class, but you got people to sign something showing that they support whatever motion is being started. Rallies, demonstration, you can attend town hall meetings or city council meetings. Anyone is allowed to attend our city council meetings. So a city council meeting is when our councillors and our mayor meet to discuss some issues or to pass laws. People are allowed to go in and sit and listen because our government values transparency, which means that they have nothing to hide from us. They want the people to know what is happening in our meetings. And the last way we can have a say is through voting. Obviously, you're not allowed to vote until you're 18. But you can still have conversations with adults in your life about who they're voting for, or who you would vote for, and why you would vote for that person. Okay, so this graph here is actually very important because when we think of local government, we think cities and we think big cities. So when we think of Alberta, it's Edmonton, Calgary, Fort McMurray, but we can't forget that there's other types of communities that exist within our province. So when we're talking about the big cities, that's where we're looking at an urban government. So our top elected official is a mayor, and then the elected officials are our councillors. Okay, and there's a councillor for each ward in the city. In a rural community, so that's where it's more out, it's not a big city, it's smaller towns, their top elected official is called a reeve. If you want to remember that one, you can think of Mr. Auberge's daughter. And they have elected councillors as well. Then we have our First Nations communities. Their top elected official is a chief, and then there's a council that's selected by the entire community, and they choose who's on that council. Then our Métis settlements have a chairperson as their top elected official, and they have 5 council members. This chart and knowing the names of each of these has actually come up on PATs in the past, so it's really, really important that when we think local government, we're not just thinking of our urban communities. Okay, so we're going to skip down to number 3 here, which are how local governments are elected. So elections occur here. It says every 3 years. You can cross that out. It's actually every 4 years that that a new local government is elected. So here are the steps. Number 1 is nomination. So not just anyone can be nominated. You have to be a Canadian citizen. You have to be 18 years or older, and you have to have lived in the city for at least 6 months. After you're nominated, that's when the campaigning starts. So that's when you really get people to know who you are, what your ideas are. That's when we start to see signs and people who are running for councillor or mayor going to speak at places and sharing their ideas with citizens. Then there's election day. That's when people go and vote for who they want. And then the vote happens and we see who's going to be our mayor or councillor. When there is an election, again, as a voter, I would vote for who I want to be our mayor, who I want to be the councillor for my ward, and there are 12 wards total. I would also pick one school board trustee, depending on whether I'm with the public board or the Catholic board. Since I teach at Edmonton Public Schools, I would vote for a school trustee in the public, from the public school board, and there are 9 wards. So there'd be 9 elected school board trustees. So some people have asked me before, why do we learn about government when we're in grade 6 when we can't vote, so we really don't have a say anyways? You're right, you can't vote until you're 18, but it doesn't mean that you can't make a difference and that you can't have a voice. I think it's important as a citizen, regardless of your age, to know what is going on in our government because it directly impacts us and how our lives are. So it's really, really important that you have a strong understanding of that. You can get involved in a number of ways, more for adults too, but you can start programs that collect and distribute food or clothing, bring meals, organize cleanup campaigns to pick up litter. This doesn't have to be adults. You can do these kinds of things. You can raise money to start different kinds of programs. You can help with the homeless. There's lots of different ways that you can volunteer. And although you're not directly impacting the government, you're making a difference in our city. So you are participating as a local citizen. The last part that we discussed is school boards. So why do we have school boards? So when I say school board, I'm talking about those trustees that we elect. So they make decisions about educational services and programming in schools. So they're kind of that person who provides a link between citizens and the people to our schools and our government. So the reason why it's important for everyone to have a voice in what happens in the schools is that everybody cares about the schools, whether you live in a community close by a school, whether you are a student at a school or you have kids or grandkids who go to a school. Also, what students are learning has a big impact on our future as a society. So everybody is a stakeholder in some way in schools. So it's important that we kind of have that person so that we can stay informed and that we can also give our opinions and our ideas on what should be happening with our schools, anywhere from building new schools to curriculum that is being taught. Sorry, I had to just abruptly pause there because someone walked in and I didn't want them thinking that I was talking to myself. So where was I? I was talking about school boards and what they do. I think I pretty much covered it all there. Now, there's different types of schools that are in our city. So there's a public school, which is what you go to, EPSB Edmonton Public School Board. There's separate schools, which are Catholic schools. So that would be like St. Stanislaus. And they kind of follow a Catholic faith. So there's a little bit more of a religion aspect in their curriculum. There's Francophone schools. So that's different from a French immersion program because the students who go to these schools, they speak French at home. And they speak French throughout the entire day while they're at school. There's also charter schools. So charter schools learn the same kinds of things that you guys do, except they aren't part of a government board. They have their own small school board. So usually it's consisted of parents who make decisions for the school. They sometimes have a special focus, so maybe they're more of an academic school, maybe they focus more on technology or music, but they have their own board. And then there's First Nations schools that are run by our First Nations groups. It says Aboriginal here, but that's no longer a term that we use First Nations. So again, this is a very condensed version of what we learned about local government. I would review your notes that we have taken in class together, as well as page 196 to 239 of your textbook. There's some really good information there. I'll post a link to those pages on School Zone as well. and it explains everything in just a little bit more detail. Again, email me or come to me if you have any questions on local government. Thank you.